guys, and welcome to Field Notes. Now when I first started learning geology, one of the things that confused me the most was how you even begin to look at a hunk of rock and determine what happened to get it there. How do you know that those cracks are not man-made? And how can you determine the line when one rock starts and another rock ends? And what do you do when you've found it? Some of this comes from stratigraphic hierarchy, or how we divide rocks into units. It's much like how we divide plants and animals into King Philip came over for good spaghetti. Kingdom, phylum, genus, what is it? Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? By doing this, this gives us a starting point as to how we divide the massive amounts of rocks on Earth. So to start, this is what the hierarchy looks like. This hierarchy is dependent on being able to tell when rock composition or rock properties have changed. A lot of the time you will have an actual list of all the different rocks that you are going to be expected to see. Like, say, if you were out mapping. But you're still gonna spend a lot of time, like, hunched over one rock determining if it's a limestone or a dolomite. Sometimes it is really obvious, and other times it is way more blurry. Here's some list. Here's one such list. Do you see it? It's a list of all of the different rock types that you will find near Red Lodge, Montana. This is the only example I have of it. Look at it, it's so dirty. So to get started learning about this hierarchy, we need to know that the base term is formation. Like we've seen many times before, geology can be kind of wishy-washy, so there is no hard and fast rule for what qualifies a new formation, and is dependent on how complex the geology of the area is. In other words, what qualifies as a new formation in Illinois may not be the same as what qualifies for a new formation in Montana. So past the formation ranking, we can get larger and we can get smaller. Let's get larger first. If there are two or more formations that seem to share some sort of characteristic, either they are the same kind of rock, or they have the same distinctive fossil within them, we can group them together in a group. And if there are two or more groups that seem to go together, we can group them into the less common but still a thing supergroup. Now supergroups are not really common, but they do exist, so they're a good thing to keep in mind. Now going the opposite way, getting smaller from formations, we have members. There's no real standard for separation for a member. Basically, if you think this hunk of rock is different enough in the formation, you can have a member. And then finally, the last two that I want to mention are bed and flow. A bed is the smallest formal unit. Only distinctive beds are given formal names, and really all a bed does is help you determine where you are within a member or a formation. And finally, a flow is kind of what it sounds like. It is a volcanic event that you can see in a member or a formation. And much like members, these are only given names if it is distinctive and widespread. So while these generic terms are all well and good, sometimes things just get too blurry and too complicated to divide anything past a formation. And honestly, sometimes you just look at it and go, well, there's a lot of different things going on here, but it's generally the same kind of rock, so you put it into a group. A great example of something that is just too complex to divide any further is the Madison Limestone group. Now I have heard this called the Madison Limestone Formation. I have heard this called the Madison Limestone Supergroup. I have personally been taught that it is the Madison Limestone group. The Madison Limestone is a rock that is found out west. It is found all over the place out west. If you see a humongous hunk of limestone, you are probably looking at the Madison Limestone. So the Madison Limestone is not only limestone, it has interbedded shale sections, it has sections where it is more fossiliferous, but then it will switch back to this original limestone. So instead of dividing each of these tiny sections of shales and tiny sections of different types of limestones, geologists have kind of grouped this whole thing together into one big limestone group. Okay, so now that we've got these basic terms down, how do we use it in active geology? Active geology. As opposed to that sedentary geology. Oh, that all reeks of a bad geology pun, doesn't it? So the two main ways are going to be in stratigraphic columns and in mapping. Stratigraphic columns are basically vertical column representations of layers of rocks. And really, they deserve their own video, so that's all we're gonna say about them. But you'll notice that they're labeled with the names of the rocks, and that each of those rock sections are of varying thicknesses, which corresponds to how thick the unit actually actually is when you saw it. Again, depending on whether you're doing a snapshot of a huge depth or simply 10 meters, is going to determine how far you break the units down. If you're doing a column all the way down to bedrock, then you might just stick to labeling groups and formations. But if you're looking at one group in particular, you'll probably label members, beds, and flows. Next, we use these names as well as the strat columns for the age-old geology pastime of mapping. Now, mapping with a strat column and determining where the original breaks are in a rock are pretty similar. With typical mapping that you will do for classes and research, you probably are already going to have a strat column with all of the names of rocks that you should expect to see. But like I said, you're probably going to spend a decent amount of your time just bending over a rock determining what it is. Just like somebody would have when they were first making the list. So that is all we've got for an introduction to stratigraphic hierarchy. Something else that is really helpful when you're dealing with these is to remember Steno's laws. I have a whole separate video on Steno's laws. It's really quick. Be sure to check it out. Remember that Field Notes is now on Patreon, so pop over to my Patreon page to check out some of the perks that you could get, or suggest some if you have something in particular that you would like from me. Maybe Google Hangouts? Been playing with that idea for a while. Be sure to leave any questions that you might have in the comments. I try to get to just about everybody. And remember to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more, and I will see you guys next time. Mr. Bug, I'm gonna save you. Drew does not believe me that you're in here. I found a bug. Now, supergroups are not super common.